missiles over capitals, drones over skylines, and now Dubai? If a city known for luxury, finance, and global business can be struck, what does that tell you about how wide this conflict is spreading? And more importantly, who benefits from pushing it this far? Because this isn't just another headline buried under breaking news banners. Drone strikes hitting Dubai would signal something much larger, a deliberate expansion of confrontation across the Middle East. And when Iran escalates across multiple fronts at once, it's not random, it's calculated. So ask yourself, is this retaliation, deterrence, or the opening phase of something much bigger? Iran's drone warfare strategy has evolved over the last decade. Instead of relying solely on traditional military force, Tehran has invested heavily in unmanned aerial systems, cheap to produce, hard to detect, difficult to attribute immediately, and politically deniable. Why send a fighter jet when you can send a drone? Drones allow Iran or groups aligned with it to strike infrastructure, energy facilities, or strategic targets without triggering an instant full-scale war. It creates ambiguity. It buys time. It pressures opponents without crossing the line into open conventional conflict. But Dubai is not just any city. Dubai represents economic stability in a volatile region. It represents investor confidence, tourism, trade, global finance. If drones are striking near or within the UAE, that's not just a military message, it's an economic one. Think about it. What happens to markets when investors believe Gulf airspace is no longer secure? What happens to oil routes if insurance premiums skyrocket? What happens to tourism when drone alerts interrupt business districts? This is why escalation involving the UAE is so significant. The UAE has positioned itself as a stabilizing force, building ties with Israel, maintaining strategic partnerships with the United States, and engaging cautiously with Iran diplomatically. It has tried to balance relationships rather than burn bridges. So if drone strikes are reaching Dubai, that suggests one of two possibilities. Either Iran or actors aligned with Iran are signaling dissatisfaction with Gulf alliances, or someone wants to drag the UAE deeper into the regional confrontation. And here's the part that should concern everyone watching this. Drone warfare lowers the threshold for escalation. A missile launch is obvious. A fighter jet crossing airspace is obvious. But drones can be launched from proxies, from remote regions, even from disguised platforms. Attributing becomes murky. And when attribution becomes murky, retaliation becomes complicated. If a drone hits infrastructure in Dubai, who responds? The UAE directly? The United States under security cooperation agreements? Israel if intelligence suggests coordination? Or does it remain contained to avoid full regional war? Let's step back. Iran's regional strategy has long relied on asymmetric pressure. Instead of fighting opponents head-on, it builds networks in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. These networks can apply pressure simultaneously. So when we talk about Iran attacking countries across the Middle East, what we're often describing is coordinated pressure across multiple theaters. One front sees rocket fire, another sees drone incursions, another sees cyber activity, another maritime tension near key shipping lanes. It's multi-dimensional. Now imagine you're a decision-maker in Abu Dhabi. Do you respond publicly and risk wider war? Or do you quietly reinforce air defenses and avoid escalation? What would you do? The UAE has invested heavily in advanced air defense systems. Cooperation with Western partners means surveillance coverage is far stronger than it was a decade ago. But no defense system is perfect. Even a drone that gets intercepted still sends a message. It says, "We can reach you." And that message alone can shake regional confidence. Here's another question for you. Do you believe drone warfare makes conflicts more likely or less likely to spiral into full war? Drop your answer below. Now zoom out further. If drone strikes are occurring in the Gulf while tensions between Iran and Israel remain high and the United States maintains military presence in the region, we're not looking at isolated events. We're looking at overlapping fault lines.
energy markets, security alliances, airspace control, proxy networks, all intersecting. Dubai is symbolic. It represents the image of a Middle East moving toward modernization and economic integration. An attack there disrupts that narrative, and narratives matter in geopolitics. If investors begin to question regional stability, pressure builds on governments to respond forcefully, and once responses begin, they rarely stop neatly. But here's where things get even more complex. Iran often frames its actions as defensive responses to perceived encirclement, sanctions pressure, or military threats. Its leadership argues that forward deterrence, pushing influence outward, prevents conflict from reaching its own territory. So from Tehran's perspective, drone pressure might be viewed as a strategic shield. From Gulf capitals, it's viewed as destabilization, two entirely different interpretations of the same event. That's the dangerous part, because when each side believes it is acting defensively, escalation becomes easier to justify. Now consider the role of technology. Drones are no longer primitive tools. Range, precision, swarm capability, these have improved dramatically. Some systems can evade radar more effectively than traditional aircraft, and the cost imbalance is staggering. It can cost thousands to launch a drone and millions to intercept it. Is that sustainable long-term? What happens when repeated small-scale strikes slowly drain defensive resources? This is not just about one incident in Dubai. It's about a strategic shift in how regional power is projected. And here's something else to consider. How much of what we see is signaling versus preparation? Sometimes drone launches are meant less to cause damage and more to test response times, to probe defenses, to gather data. Would you interpret it as a warning shot or a rehearsal? Let me know what you think. The broader Middle East is entering an era where conventional war and shadow war overlap. Commercial hubs, energy corridors, and civilian airspace are now part of the strategic chessboard. That changes everything, because once commercial centers are touched, global attention intensifies, insurance markets react, diplomatic pressure increases, military coordination deepens, and the more actors involved, the harder it becomes to control the chain reaction. So where does this go? There are three possible paths. Containment, where drone activity remains limited, diplomatic backchannels work overtime, and escalation stops short of open war. Retaliatory cycle, where each strike prompts another, expanding gradually across borders. Or major confrontation, where one incident crosses a red line and forces direct military engagement between states. Which path do you think is most likely? Comment below. Dubai being targeted or even threatened marks a psychological threshold. It signals that economic sanctuaries are no longer off limits. And when sanctuaries disappear, fear spreads faster than missiles. The Middle East has seen decades of rivalry, proxy conflict, and power competition. But the normalization of drone warfare across capitals introduces a new layer of unpredictability. Not dramatic speeches, not televised declarations. Small aircraft, quiet launches, sudden explosions. That's the new reality shaping the region. And the question is no longer whether tensions are rising. The question is how far they will go, and who is prepared for the consequences. Because once drones redefine the battlefield, every skyline becomes a potential message. And in a region already balancing on strategic fault lines, even a small spark can light a much larger fire. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think this is controlled signaling or the early stages of something far bigger? Let's discuss.